Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers as we look ahead to tonight's action, NBA and college basketball, Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. And Alex Smart's going to join us in just a moment, and we'll take a look at NBA and college hoops, and also we'll have a nice look ahead to all the NBA games coming up in just a little bit. So let's bring him on. Alex Smart, good to see you again. And I'm sure, Alex, that what's your feeling on football season being over with as a handicapper? That a little bit of relief, or I think a lot of people want to feel that way. But how do you feel when the football season ends?
Every year, because we're in a different position than even how would we say it, a regular punter would be, because we know how many people, and the majority of people in this country in the world actually love to bet college and NFL football. So, it's that it's like now we're dealing with a whole new audience, and it's funny. Some people only will bet football. So, but the truth of it is, no matter how popular football is, it only makes up a portion of our profits. If we're not just handicappers and professional bettors, it only makes up a portion of our profits, because most of our profits will come from the expanded amount of games we get to hit in college basketball and the NBA.
So you finished pretty well in NFL this season, 64-45 on Vegas Insider, plus 1420, and you hit the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So I don't want to say never in doubt, because the Rams were up 10 early, but you had to feel good at least going to the fourth quarter with the Bengals winning. Yeah,
Bengals games have been like that all year. You've noticed that too, Kevin. They're just they're back and forth, and you really wonder. I didn't like the way the game ended. We'll put it that way. Even though I covered, I didn't like the way the game ended. There was just too many. Once again, I'm one of these crazies that thinks AI should take over officiating to some extent. So, yeah, that's all I can say about that.
But you did have a pretty solid postseason. You finished with 8 consecutive wins. I guess before we move on to the basketball, what did you see so clearly in the playoffs where, you were just rolling to end the season?
You know what it's like, Kevin. You get into a groove, and you start to notice. You can go back all your losing streaks and all your winning runs over the years, and you can almost specifically start to pick out what weaknesses you were exhibiting at the time, for whatever reason. And I mean, it's a learning process, and it continues for years on end. I'll be 60 this summer, and it's been a lifelong, battle of ups and downs. And I think the basic is here that we want long-term profits, and it's worked out that way for me. But, if you look back over the years, you can really, if you do sometime, if you have a chance, look back, and you'll almost see what was going on with your inadequacies during your losing streaks, for example.
How often do you, as a handicapper, Alex, like now that football is done with and you're still busy with NBA and college basketball, how much time do you spend looking back at the football season at NFL and at college, or do you just put on the back burner for a bit, worry about basketball, and then get back on it during the summer?
The thing is, when I was younger, I was a big football fan. So I watched football, essentially what was going on with it year round. I knew everything. I knew every program pretty well across the nation that, meant something to me. And I knew how it was going to be transitioning into the next year, who the 4 and 5 star recruits are, on and on and on. And now I don't pay attention anymore. And the reason being is, your mind can only take so much information. I don't want to get Alzheimer's. Like I said, I'm getting older, so I try to limit that amount of information and just focus on basketball season right now and some NHL.
Well, the NBA, you've done well, 54% on the site. You're 10-4-1 in your last 15 selections. You split last night, and you had a good hit with the Pacers. They covered at Milwaukee, even though Giannis came back and played. He scored 50 in the game. Bucks had a bad loss to the Blazers a few nights ago without Giannis, and he came back. And Indiana had lost 3 to Milwaukee this year. So what did you like about the Pacers last night, getting 11.5?
I think the Pacers are on the one of those teams that are on the edge. And I know the losing streak continues, but they're just one of those teams that's on the edge. And I just don't think they're as bad as maybe the record would indicate. there's something to be said about teams that can pull W's out of their butts type thing, and this team hasn't been able to. So I think it's one of those situations with this team that it could sway either way at any point here as we make a run after the All-Star break.
Now, the other game you had, unfortunately, you're on the wrong side of it. You had the 76ers against Boston, and the Celtics, first on them. It's just amazing what they're doing right now. That I feel like they're just obliterating these teams, and they came back against Atlanta on Sunday down 10 at the half, but they're limiting all these teams less than 100 points. It's just amazing what the Celtics have done recently.
Yeah, we were starting to give up on the Celtics. I never give up on any team because the way the NBA is, and if you see the talent bases there, at some point, that's the same thing with Indiana. I really think there's enough talent for them to do a little bit better than they've been doing. And but I mean, Boston's a solid team, solid coaching. It's a solid franchise, and that brand continues to get stronger right now.
What were your impressions of the James Harden, Ben Simmons trade? Obviously, Harden hasn't played yet. He'll play after the All-Star break. Simmons hasn't suited up for Brooklyn. But who do you think won that trade? What do you think for both sides?
When I won't make my decision on that until the season sort of progresses a little bit more. But I started to wonder to myself as I watched Boston just obliterate the 76ers that. What's happened? Maybe is there a letdown somewhere through the team? Or is it just a one-game situation? It makes me wonder.
Yeah, and for Philadelphia, whenever they get Harden in there with Embiid, it'll be really curious to see. And the same thing with Brooklyn, because they still got to get Kevin Durant back. And the Nets play the Knicks tonight at the Garden, and we'll see if Kyrie plays, with all of his stuff. So I want to look at some NBA with you for tonight and the showcase game later at Crypto.com Arena. The Jazz and the Lakers, they meet up in LA. LeBron, I feel like there's always a question mark going into every game. But the Lakers, they covered against Golden State last time out. Utah, it helps when you have your best player back in the lineup. And with Donovan Mitchell back, all of a sudden Utah looks like one of these teams to beat in the West. But what are your thoughts here with the Jazz laying points against the Lakers?
Well, I don't know. When I look at this game, it's always important that we get the senior guys in there. Like we need LeBron James in there, and we need Westbrook in there, and Anthony Davis is probable tonight. So you have to take that into consideration when handicapping this game. But this is another team that the Lakers. They're a team that is definitely capable of making a move, but they're not. And then you have to maybe dig deeper and try to figure out why they're not making a move. Why are they not moving? Because I think the fan base, I think the betting pundits, I think everybody's starting to wonder here. They've got to make a move, and they've got to give us at least some, anticipation of where we're headed. Right now, I don't know, but laying this many points with the Lakers still feels a little bit uneasy for me.
So now let's go to college basketball. And in the Big Ten, Rutgers has been a great story this year. They host Illinois, and Rutgers has covered 4 straight. They beat Ohio State at home. They beat Michigan State at home. They just won at Wisconsin. Now they get Illinois, and they're still a short dog. And remember earlier this year, they beat Purdue at home. So Rutgers, they'll be in the tournament. Illinois continues to play well. Also, what do you think here with Illinois laying points in Piscataway this evening?
I'm not crazy about it, but I still believe that Illinois, according at least to my data, is the better team. And just from a logical perspective, looking at the talent base on both teams, I really thought when this season started that they were every bit as good as like a team like Baylor from the Big 12. And right now I'm in that situation where I still need to see a little bit more from Illinois. I think they're capable of it, but this is a really bad matchup. And Rutgers is one of those arenas. It's a really, really hard place to play in. It's sort of compact. The crowd's right in on you. I don't think it's a great environment for any team. And Rutgers always has an advantage there. So you always got to look at taking the points, in my opinion, anyway. But Illinois is such a quality team. It's, once again, it's on the edge.
Well, and also Illinois beat Rutgers 86-51 the last time they played back in early December in Champaign. So Rutgers, I'm sure, is not forgetting that. And Illinois, not to say, look, you can't look ahead in any Big Ten games, but coming up, Alex, at Michigan State, Ohio State at home at Michigan. So Illinois cannot afford to trip up here against this Rutgers team that obviously has proven that they are a pretty good underdog. That's now 6 consecutive covers as an underdog. So we'll see if they make it 7 tonight.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but at the same time, I have a lot of respect for Illinois, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it should be a pretty good game inside of the Big Ten. Alex Smart, you could find his picks on Vegas Insider. He had a great NFL season, but he's not just done with football. He's got basketball, so check him out. NBA, he's on fire. College basketball as well, and also some hockey as well. Alex, thank you so much for the time, as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sorry about the long answer, but whether I pay attention to football or not, too, that was sort of like extended.
No, it's fine. I think a lot of people like hearing that. They like to hear, what you do. Like, do you just close the book on it and move on? Or do you say, all right, I'm going to look at my basketball, but also I'm going to kind of review some football to see what I can do for next season or how you do it? Because I'm sure everyone does it differently.
Yeah, I think everybody does it differently. I just wanted to add one thing, Kevin. Yep. It's sometimes it's about unit base, and I pretty well it's the same unit for everything across the board. And I think there are football bettors who feel because there's a more condensed schedule for whatever reason, because that's their how do you say, their best sports to bet on. They'll increase that amount. So it's not about it's not, the profit isn't based that way, if that makes any sense. So.
Well, we appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. All right, Kevin. Take care, brother.
All right, you too. There is Alex Smart. Check out his work at Vegas Insider. And, this is a very interesting time of year because for those people that handicap multiple sports, that handicap NFL and college football, but then continue, they do NBA and college basketball, maybe even hockey, during the fall and then into the spring, there's no break in a sense. But the advantage you've had is you're not asking the question, oh, who's hot in the NBA? Who's hot in college basketball? You already know that, as opposed to the people, and again, they're not wrong, but the ones that just concentrate, go all the way in on NFL and college football. And then once the Super Bowl is over, okay, let me now tune in and watch some college basketball. I want to get ready for March Madness. You're way behind the 8 ball. And I've always believed, and I'm not breaking news here, but I've always believed that you miss, even for me personally, you miss a day or two, a week maybe in these sports. I feel very lost. That how are you going to jump in 3 months in and not have any idea of what's going on? Not have any idea that Rutgers has played well as an underdog over the last month or so, and they pulled off some really big wins. When you look at the NBA and the trades that have been made, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are playing very well. The Toronto Raptors, after a slow start, they're playing well. The Knicks aren't playing well. That it's just so hard to play catch up after all that time. And again, if you do football only and then you shut it down for a while and get back to football, that's great. No matter how you do things, that's fine. I've just always believed it's so hard to jump into the game so late and expect to do well. So that's just where my opinion lies. Doesn't mean you can't still buy picks or still be interested, but at least for me, I think it's easier to follow this thing from the start. But then again, if you don't enjoy basketball, you won't do it, and that's fine too. I enjoy basketball, so that's the difference there. Before we continue, I want to tell you about Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. Get up to $300 in free bets. This is legal only in the state of Colorado. Must be 21 years or older to play. Full terms and conditions apply. Again, for new users only. Here's the breakdown of how it works. If you're a new player, make a bet of $10 or more and receive a $10 free bet up to 30 times. And the promo code is ROAD, ROAD 300. And again, full terms and conditions apply, legal only in the state of Colorado. Check them out online at sisportsbook.com. It is the Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. All right, now let's take a look at some NBA for tonight, a lot of NBA. And last night, I guess, really the big stories, as I mentioned with Alex, what Boston did to Philadelphia. The Celtics are just very impressive right now. 135-87 win. I had the over in this game. I mentioned this yesterday on the show with Stephanie Odie, and I said, I like the over of 210. It dropped to 209. I was very afraid going into the fourth quarter, considering it was such a blowout. But the Celtics and 76ers, they sat their starters, emptied the benches, and you had 34-29 in the fourth. Only needed 52. So that was a good result there. Also, the bad beat of the night, in case you had it, was the Charlotte, Minnesota under. Total closed at 244. It was 108 going to overtime, so 216. Charlotte was up most of that game, and they ended up leading by 9 going to the fourth, and Minnesota still came back, tied it. They combined for 30 points in overtime. Timberwolves won 126-120. Luckily, it pushed at 6, but Minnesota was leading, I think, by 7 in overtime, so that would have been a terrible loss both ways. If you had Charlotte in the under, you pushed on Charlotte if you got the 6. But, yeah, that's a really bad one to swallow there. Dallas, a winner at Miami last night. The Mavs were getting 5.5. They rallied in that one. They were down 8.5. Memphis without Ja Morant. They went into New Orleans and beat the Pelicans 121-109. So New Orleans, after they blew out Toronto, they didn't look too good against the Grizzlies, who were without their best player. Suns, they hold off the Clippers 103-96, 221.5 total. So that one easily stayed under. Hawks ended up bouncing back after a couple tough losses to the Spurs and the Celtics. They beat the Cavaliers 124-116. That one never in doubt over. And that Bucks game we mentioned with Alex Smart, Bucks don't cover, but they win 128-119, 14.5-point favorites. And Indiana, they lose all 4 times in Milwaukee this year, but they finally get a cover in one of these games. All right, let's take a look now at the NBA for tonight. The Hawks and the Magic, they meet up in Orlando, and the Hawks will see what they do here with no rest. Now, remember, the All-Star break starts Friday, so you have a handful of games tomorrow, big board tonight, and then the NBA is off until next Thursday, starting Friday, so it's nearly a week off. So get it all in now if you want to. Hawks snapping a 2-game skid with that win over Cleveland last night. They've still dropped 4 of 6. They have not looked very good, but they do get the Magic tonight coming off of a West Coast trip in which Orlando went 1-3. They covered in the last game at Denver as 11.5-point dogs, 121-111. But Orlando now back to play Atlanta. And so far, the Hawks have won 2 of the first 3 meetings. That last meeting, Magic won in Atlanta 104-98. But that's very unfair considering Trae Young didn't play. Hawks were down a lot of guys. That was when they had a lot of their COVID issues around Christmas time. I know a lot of teams did, but Atlanta really was hit hard with that. Atlanta needs this win tonight because Atlanta, after the break, at Chicago, Toronto at home, at Boston. So the Hawks, they win tonight. They're 28-30. Still have work to do, but Hawks can afford to lose this game this evening. In Boston, just talk about the Celtics, 34-25, very impressive, 20-10 at home. They face the 12-45 Pistons tonight. Detroit is 4-25 on the road this season. And Detroit just played Boston a little less than 2 weeks ago, 102-93 win for the Celtics. Didn't cover as 11-point favorites at Little Caesars Arena. Game easily stayed under 214.5. And Detroit right now in the midst of an 8-game skid. They're losing by a lot in most of these games. Their lowest margin of defeat during this span is 9 twice. So when the Pistons lose, they don't lose a close game. And the last time they won was January 30th. So they haven't won this month yet. Boston, looking at some of the defensive numbers, 87, 95, 102, 91, 83, 93, 107, 92, 97. That's the last 9 games. Pretty impressive job by the Celtics. So they're laying a ton tonight against the Pistons. The Nets, we'll get to the Nets in a second. Wizards and the Pistons, they meet in Indiana. And first 2 meetings between these teams have gone over. Porzingis still out for the Wizards. Who knows when he's going to suit up, maybe after the All-Star break. And Washington won the first meeting way early in the season in overtime by 1. Pacers won the last meeting by 6 in Indianapolis. Now they meet again. Washington, yeah, they're shorthanded. No Bradley Beal. And the last time the Wizards won back-to-back games was last month against Orlando and Oklahoma City. So, I mean, I don't want to insult Indiana. I mean, the Pacers are a little above those teams, but the Pacers aren't exactly a playoff team. But Indiana has lost 7 straight. They played a lot of high-scoring games. They're on an 8-1 overrun the last 9. Last 2 games they went over. Totals of 239 at Milwaukee last night, 240 against Minnesota. Both them easily went over. And Indiana's on a nice overstretch at home as well. But this total of 226.5 tonight in Indianapolis. The Nets and the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. And I do not believe Kyrie Irving will play tonight. He still is ineligible in New York City. So he can't play in the Brooklyn home games. First time the Nets are at the Knicks this year. So we probably won't see Kyrie tonight. The Nets beat the Kings 109-85 as 2-point dogs back on Monday. Seth Curry played well in that game. LaMarcus Aldridge came back. He got a couple pieces, and it's not that terrible. But Ben Simmons still out. Durant's still out. And that snapped an 11-game skid. So the Nets face the Knicks, who have dropped 6 of 7 and 8 of 10. They somehow won at Golden State during the stretch. They blew that 23-point lead at Portland on Saturday. And they lost at home to Oklahoma City as 10-point favorites in overtime on Monday, 127-123. So the Knicks, even though Julius Randle played well, had a triple-double, Evan Fournier bounced back. He had a bad game at Portland. He had 29 against the Thunder. Still, poor job by the Knicks. They have been one of the big disappointments this year. And I don't know if we expected too much out of them or what. But, again, this line has moved up. I'm expecting Kyrie not to play. The Kings and the Bulls in Chicago. Total of 232.5, and Chicago laying only 4.5. Zach LaVine's still out for the Bulls, who have won 4 straight. They pulled away from San Antonio on Monday. Sacramento comes in. They had a 2-game winning streak snapped at Brooklyn. No surprise there, but also what doesn't help is De'Aaron Fox at 26, which is fine. Harrison Barnes and Domantas Sabonis combined for 15 points. You're not beating anybody if those guys don't play well. And Davion Mitchell has actually been a really decent acquisition. I mean, it's an acquisition draft pick out of Baylor. He had 13 points. DiVincenzo from the Bucks, he came over. He had 12 points. But Sacramento shot 31 of 90, 34% from the floor. They made 9 threes. That's not going to win a lot of games for them. So Chicago, they continue to roll. They've hit the under in 3 of 4. They had a nice over streak. Now they've gone kind of backwards on that. And these teams meeting up for the first time this season. No word if Ja Morant is playing yet for the Grizzlies after they beat the Pelicans on the road last night. So Memphis back home to face Portland. I'm going to give the Blazers credit here that I understand it's only 3 games, but this Portland team, who had its entire roster ripped apart, I know Damian Lillard is sidelined, but C.J. McCollum got traded. Norman Powell got traded. There's not a lot there with that Blazers team. Anthony Simons has played well. They still have Jokic. But the Blazers beat the Lakers at home as 9.5-point dogs. They came back and beat the Knicks as a dog. They won at Milwaukee as a dog. Giannis didn't play, but still, that's a good win for Portland. I'm not going to totally discredit that because Giannis didn't play. So Portland has won and covered 3 straight as a dog. They're getting 11.5 tonight at Memphis. Do you catch the Grizzlies here? Back from a 3-game road trip. All 3 games they won. All 3 games they've covered. Memphis has won 6 in a row, 9 of 10. They're 9-1 ATS during the stretch. So a lot of positive signs for Memphis. The 2 teams have split a pair of meetings this year, but again, the last meeting, you had Lillard and McCollum in there for the Blazers in those games, or in that last game. This is a really interesting matchup here. Toronto and Minnesota. Anthony Edwards is questionable night ankle injury suffered last night in the win over Charlotte. Toronto's dropped 2 straight after they were in a nice winning streak. They just got blasted by New Orleans, 120-90 back on Monday night as 3.5-point favorites. They were just down in the dumps early in that game. So Minnesota, they came back and beat Charlotte last night. Minnesota has won now 7 of 9. They score a ton. They're 9-1 of the over the last 10 games. And the only game they finished under, they hit a 223 and a 230.5 total. So not totally crazy, but Minnesota scores a ton of points every night, in case you miss it. Minnesota 6-2 to the over this year with no rest. So the Raptors and the Wolves, and they met up earlier this season. Again, we don't take a lot from this matchup. They didn't. I was looking at another matchup. Last year when they played, I remember this game. Toronto won 86-81. That game at Target Center. That was the Anthony Edwards posterized dunk game when they played last season in Minneapolis. Spurs and the Thunder, they meet in Oklahoma City tonight. This used to be a really good playoff matchup, but obviously these teams not going to the playoffs. But first two games, both under the total this season. Spurs were up early on the Thunder in that first matchup by 14 after 1. They ended up losing that game 99-94. That was back in early November. And in the last meeting in San Antonio, Spurs dominated them 118-96. So Oklahoma City's had problems scoring against San Antonio this year. Also, Oklahoma City at home recently, 98-98-98. Not very good, even though the Thunder, they've covered 3 in a row and now 6 of 9. San Antonio wraps up their rodeo road trip. Well, technically, because of the All-Star break, they go back on the road after the road trip or after the All-Star break. But 2-2, winning at Atlanta, winning at New Orleans, losing at Chicago and Cleveland by double digits. First time they'll be a favorite on this road trip. But, the Spurs have given up a ton of points, 120, 114, 121 the last 3 games. But also Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta. That's not Oklahoma City exactly. All right, final 3 games of the night, Rockets and the Suns. And, again, Phoenix laying a bunch because they're 47-10, and Houston is 15-41. And the Suns just completely dominating, even though they didn't cover last night against the Clippers, laying 12. Before that, beat Milwaukee by 24, beat Orlando by 27. And Phoenix this season with no rest, 6-2 straight up, 4-4 against the spread, 3-4-1 to the 3 overs, 4 unders, and a push. So really nothing that decisive as far as what they do with no rest. Houston has lost 9 of 10. They've covered twice during this span. And their last few road games, they've lost by 34 at Utah, by 13 at New Orleans, by 25 at San Antonio. Last good road performance came in that 2-point loss at Golden State back in late January, getting 13. But Phoenix over a 2-touchdown favorite tonight against Houston. Nuggets and the Warriors in San Francisco. Warriors, they need to kind of get their stuff together. They've dropped 3 of 4. They're 0-5-1 against the spread in their last 6 overall. Lost to the Clippers by 15 on Monday. They've lost to the Knicks during this span. They barely beat the Lakers. So now they get a Denver team who is playing well, didn't cover against Orlando, but Nuggets have won 4 of 5, 4-1 ATS the last 5. And Denver after the break, Sacramento twice, at Portland their first 3. So they can maybe get some things going if they can get a win tonight. Denver and Golden State since the start of last season, 4 unders, 89-86 win for Denver when they met back in late December. And that was a game in which the Nuggets were in control, up by 24 at the half. Golden State came all the way back and had a chance to tie it, but ended up losing by 3. So Golden State laying 5.5, but they need to get their stuff together. Jazz and the Lakers, that's the final game of the night. And Lakers getting 4.5 at home. Lakers did beat the Jazz when they played back a few weeks ago, 101-95. There was no LeBron in that game. There was no Anthony Davis in that game. I beg your pardon if we still do that. LeBron had 25 in that game. Russell Westbrook, he stunk from the floor because that's what he's done since he's come to the Lakers. But the Lakers had some good performances off the bench in that game. And that was a game in which Donovan Mitchell was 0 of 8 from three-point range. Actually, the Jazz were 12 of 46 from 3. Mike Conley was 5 of 9. But if I want to cherry pick here, Bogdanovich, Mitchell, Jordan Clarkson, Rudy Gay, they combined to go 1 of 26 from three-point range. I don't even know how that's possible. But the Jazz did lose to the Lakers. Then Jazz, they've heated up. They've won 6 straight. They've covered 5 in a row. But all 6 of those wins came at home. And Utah struggled on the road recently. So we'll see what they do now. Favored on the road. Lakers have dropped 3 in a row. There's no shocker. Lakers got to start picking this thing up, because I don't know how you're going to depend on the Lakers to be a title favorite or be a Western Conference favorite if you're 26-31. You got to start winning some games. And the Lakers, what do they have after the All-Star break? Clippers at home, New Orleans at home, Dallas at home. That's not easy, you know? New Orleans has improved. Clippers are still tough. Dallas is good. Like, this is not going to be an easy stretch for the Lakers. And they think they can just turn it on, but I don't think that will be the case. Now, I want to look at one college basketball game before we wrap it up today, and this is actually a really good game inside of the Big 12, because you have Baylor and Texas Tech meeting up in Lubbock. Baylor's 21-4, Texas Tech is 19-6. And Baylor is off a really dominating performance against Texas on Saturday. Texas had a nice win in Oklahoma last night in overtime, back-and-forth game towards the end. But Baylor won 80-63 in Waco. Since that, Kansas lost a couple dominating wins over Kansas State and Texas. So Baylor now, they go make the short trip to Texas Tech. The Red Raiders, they had a bad performance in Oklahoma before they beat TCU on Saturday. And Texas Tech laying a few points here against Baylor. Texas Tech already won at Baylor as 11.5-point dogs. Remember, that was the game that Baylor was undefeated at Texas Tech, handed them their first loss, and then Baylor ended up losing to Oklahoma State after that. But Texas Tech has been very good this year. I feel like that's one of those deals that worked out for everyone. Chris Beard left to go to Texas. That's worked out for the Longhorns. But also Texas Tech was not left in the dark either, because right now, Kansas leads the Big 12 at 10-2. The Big 12, They lead the Big 12 at 10-2. Baylor at 9-3. Texas Tech at 8-4. Texas at 8-5. Everyone else is under 500 in the conference. So it's about top heavy. 4 teams above 500, 6 below 500. And just like we all predicted, West Virginia, they would be in last place. Exactly. But Texas Tech beat Baylor once. Now they're laying 1.5. So what a switch that is from that first matchup between those two Big 12 rivals. All right, my thanks to Alex Smart for joining us today here on the Daily Insider. Tomorrow, Stephanie Odu will be back with us, and looking forward to having her back on the show. So we will have that for our Thursday and the final day before the NBA All-Star break. So that is something that we'll be looking forward to. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. We would greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow at noon Eastern. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bets.